Okay. This is a video like explaining the schizophrenia that I had before I was delivered from it. I was raised a lukewarm Christian. All right. I was raised a lukewarm Christian. Okay. My mom, like, I know some of y'all gonna be making fun, saying, like, oh, she's schizophrenic, she don't know what she's talking about, always hearing voices. Like, here's the thing. My mom introduced me and prepared me to the voices in my head before I even had schizophrenia. Okay? When you are religious of any kind, you're going to be hearing voices in your head. Like when you're raised religious, you're going to be introduced to the voices in your head. But one religion, but Christianity is going to prepare you for the voices in your head before before it becomes schizophrenia. I'm not saying all people are going to have schizophrenia, but hear me out. Like, my mom prepared me for the voices in my head. She introduced me to God and demons before I even had schizophrenia myself. So if you're gonna laugh at me for having schizophrenia, for having schizophrenia, if you're gonna be laughing at me for having schizophrenia, for hearing voices, for hearing God's voice and the devil's voice, well, here's the thing. You may as well do the same thing to her, because she hears God's voice and she prays to God. She don't only pray to God, but she hears God too. She hears the devil's voice. She even introduced me to God and the devil's voice. She's the reason why I hear God and the devil's voice. She can play atheist and act like I don't believe in God. Oh, she's in religious mode. Like, she goes to church almost every Sunday, even though she's not a child of God. Like, not only that, my mom introduced me, like, when my mom raised me Christian, not only that she introduced me to the voices in my head, introduced me to God and Satan's voice, then she also prepared me to know which one is a good voice and which one is a bad voice before I even had schizophrenia. And I'm thankful for that. Even though I'm not thankful that I was raised lukewarm, but I'm thankful that I was raised, like, for the good parts of being raised Christian and knowing the good voices and the bad voices. Because it's like, so yeah. And the only time I really had schizophrenia, like, I think the time I really had schizophrenia is either when I entertain something scary, or I think it's more like, let's say, for example, you're in a dimly lit area and then there's this really dark, shadowy corner. And I'm just looking at that dark, shadowy corner, expecting something scary to happen over there. I look at that thing for a long time until I start seeing faces. I start seeing demons at that dark, shadowy corner. And then I start seeing them more often every night. It doesn't get bad where I feel like I'm in a whole nother world and it's like a whole distorted reality. Like I'm in a whole nother world and it's just little things. Like every night, uh I be seeing like creepy faces in really dark, shadowy corners every night, and I be seeing circles in a day. But it never gets bad. I'm always in control. I've never had a true episode. Okay, and if we go like, if you ask mom, like here's the thing, my mom don't know nothing about schizophrenia. She don't live with schizophrenia. Stop going to people. Stop going to people who don't have schizophrenia, who don't have the experience of schizophrenia to know to this, who don't have the experience of schizophrenia to decide what another person who has schizophrenia is like, to decide what another person with schizophrenia is like. Because majority y'all neurotypicals, majority y'all fellow neurotypicals be thinking you know everything about all these mental disorders, turning all these, making men be thinking that you know everything about these mental disorders, turning, making these disorders bigger than they actually are, turning every action of somebody with a mental disorder, like you like, for example, if somebody with schizophrenia is upset or mad, they're having an episode. No, they're just feeling their emotions. If an autistic person is crying or if they're mad, they're throwing a tantrum. Are they really throwing a tantrum, or are they just visibly angry? Like their feelings are valid. Like their feelings are valid. They're not going around hitting everybody. Like throwing a tantrum is similar to a kid where they're just going around hitting everybody they see. Sometimes they could scream from the top of their lungs where it looks like they're gonna hit everybody they see, but they just screaming out their stress and their frustration out, but they're not gonna harm anybody. They just letting it out. So stress, like they either have a tantrum or a meltdown. But if they're just angry, they just yelling, but they're not hitting nobody, that's not an episode. They're just upset. Even though they can do better than going around yelling at people. They like they have every right to feel angry. They have every right to feel angry. So it's like, yeah. But it's like people with mental disorders just cannot feel emotions without it being an episode. They can't even exist without being labeled a criminal. So here's the thing. When it comes to asking people, when it comes to learning about people with schizophrenia, ask the person who actually has the experience of schizophrenia. Make sure they're high functioning, because the low functioning ones are just going to make us all look bad. Like the low functioning ones can often be a danger, or maybe not, but often delusional, often suffering from hallucinations, etc. But you should also take times to listen to the high functioning people of every mental disorder. Like talk to these people. Don't only talk. Hold on. Like, stop going to the neurotypicals for advice, like, not for advice, on their experience to decide what, to decide, to decide what a schizophrenia, like, what, to decide what, to decide what somebody's, what another person's experience with schizophrenia is. Unless they are really informed about high functioning people with schizophrenia, whether they're with or without medicine. Whether they're with or without medicine. But like, they gotta be highly informed about people on the spectrum. And they cannot just be taking advice from neurotypicals. Because neurotypicals just be lying. They just be thinking they know everything about you. But they just they just but they just want to make your life harder. All right. All right. Because everything you do is not because here's the thing. All right. An honest neurotypical who is informed, an honest neurotypical who is informed will take the time to study high functioning disorders, not only low functioning and medium functioning disorders, and medium high functioning, not only low functioning or medium functioning disabilities, mental disabilities. They would also know that not everything a person does, they would not give the disability or the disorder, the mental disability or the disorder, more credit than it should actually give it. And this is what people with mental disorders and mental disabilities need to stop doing, because they get that stuff from neurotypicals. And that could be neurotypicals trying to manipulate them. So they could feel less of themselves. And it just, so they could feel less of themselves. And then they could just gaslight themselves and just be like, maybe I'm crazy. Maybe it's just the autism. Maybe it's just this. Maybe I deserve this punishment. Maybe I, like you could have more than autism if you pay attention. Like, if you pay attention to the people you surround yourself with, you could have more than one mental disability. You could have trauma. It could be anything. I'm just saying. I'm just saying. Because here's the thing. After years of learning a lot about myself, I've learned there's a lot of things that are going on in my life that is not autistic. I've learned a lot of things that are going in my life that is not autistic. And that some things that my autism should not have that much credit. I'm going through a lot of trauma. I've learned that there are some things that I didn't know was abuse until adulthood. I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot about myself. Uh, I've learned a lot about myself. Like, sometimes I just be stressing. Like, sometimes, like, I be stressing, trying to work on my health, trying to work on my mental health. Like, I be so focused on working on my mental health. I've been asking God, like, okay, There's a whole lot of stuff that I need to work on. I need your help, Lord. I need to heal. Like, I want to make sure I get this together. There's a whole lot that I'm working on. I'm healing. I'm healing every day. So there's so much. So yeah. Every day I'm always trying to find a mental health day, and I'm also working on managing more of my time. Sometimes I be lazy. Sometimes my lazy days are just me stressing about how lazy I am and overthinking, like just crazy. Like, I struggle to relax sometimes. I burn out, but I'm always striving to become better. I've been bugging God every day, always looking for some self care, always looking for something to help me grow as a person. Like, just, just always looking for something to help me grow as a person. So, yeah. So, when it comes to schizophrenia, so when it comes to schizophrenia, if you are born in a Christian household or any religious household, you're going to be hearing voices. You're going to be hearing voices, whether it's God's voice or the devil's voice. All these voices that, like, if you are born in a Muslim house or in a Buddhist house, like, it's always God and the devil's voice. It don't matter what it is. It's always God and the devil's voice. Like, depending on what Buddha says, if it's something that God would say, it's God. If depending on what God would say, like, depending on what, like, here's the thing. If Buddha says something, if God would actually says the same thing, depending on what it is, then it's God. But if Buddha says sacrifice yourself, that's the devil. Okay, Buddha can be God and the devil, depending on the Buddha can be God and the devil at the same time. So yeah, it don't matter what religion you is, you're always praying to God. You're always praying to the Christian God. And the voices you hear are always God or the devil. You born and raised in any religious household, you hearing voices. Whether you diagnosed with schizophrenia or not. And there are atheists who there are atheists who there are atheists who hear voices. Like, literally everybody hears God's voice. Everybody whose mind has a mind of its own can, hold on, all right, anybody whose mind has a mind of its own hears voices in their head. Like, when you're cooking and your mind automatically knows how to measure, God is talking to you. If you're minding your business and you have some random intrusive thought, that's the devil. It don't have to be it don't have to be constant, loud, and obvious in order for it to be negative voices in your head. It can be every once in a while, quiet and subtle. Everybody goes through that, whether it's constant and loud, or quiet and every once in a while. Everybody hears God's voice when you learn new things from your own brain that you don't remember learning from anything else. You don't even remember studying yourself. So yeah, that's proof that God is real. So yeah. But when but the disorder of schizophrenia where when you're seeing creepy faces in the dark, and you're having hallucinations so bad that your reality is so disordered that you don't know what is real and what isn't, and you're always banging your head on the wall for no reason. Like, that's literally possession. I never experienced that. I have never experienced that when I had schizophrenia. I was always sober. And then people say, like, when you're paranoid and that's schizophrenia. Like, that can be, but sometimes you can be paranoid and sober from schizophrenia. The times where I was paranoid, I was actually sober. That was trauma. It was trauma. Like, let me tell you something. After years of putting up with toxic people, betrayal, toxic friends who are always treating you like crap, being fake behind your back, talking trash to your face, always talking over you. When you deal with toxic people your whole life, fake people, people who have ulterior motives, uh, when you deal with fake people your whole life, toxic people your whole life, never being taught how to protect yourself from dangerous people, you just because and then and not only that, when you are shy and you have been a doormat for a long time, and and then you eventually learn that being shy and being a doormat attracts toxic people. Like, when you're shy and you eventually learn that being shy and a doormat attracts toxic people, you start having trust issues because of the amount of toxic people you put up with your whole life. So my paranoia did not come from schizophrenia. It came from trauma. There are many neurotypicals out there who didn't have schizophrenia, but they suffered a lot of abuse their whole life, never being taught to protect themselves, and they didn't trust nobody. They were paranoid. They were paranoid. They didn't trust they don't trust anybody that comes their way because they have dealt with too much betrayal in their life. They've dealt with a lot of hurt, either from a man in their life, from a friend, or from many friends and many men in their life. They just gave up, so they like, just stay away from me, everyone. So it's like that. So it's like, I was completely sober. I was not in no distorted reality. I know where I was at. I just didn't trust nobody. I know they were not monsters or demons. I just don't trust nobody because of the toxic people I've dealt with in my past. The crazy thing about my family, they always like to tell me, everybody ain't your friend. Everybody ain't your friend. But whenever I tell somebody about the red flags of somebody, they be like, hey, how do you know that? How do you know that? You don't know that. That's a misunderstanding. You should be friends with that person. Like, here's the thing. But when I cut that friend out of my life, that was the time where I built my intuition up. But that time when I cut the friend out of my, the time when I cut the friend out of my life and knew the red flags, that was when I built my intuition up. When I told my family, when I told my family about the stuff, that was when I built my intuition up. That was when I built my intuition up, and that was when I built my intuition up to protect myself from toxic people, so I can trust, so I can know who I can and can't trust. So when I cut somebody off, it's not because of trust issues. It's because I know somebody is up to no good. So, back to the story, whenever I I built my intuition. So my family like to say like everybody ain't your friend, but whenever I built my intuition and his friend is clearly showing red flags, they like to tell me to throw that under the bus and be like, how do you know? They like to interrupt me, constantly interrupt me with, how do you know? You don't know that. Still, you should be with that friend. You owe that friend's friendship. You owe that friend your friendship. How do you know that? You should be friends with that. How do you know? How do you know? How do you know? Like, they want you to put up with their bull crap. That's probably because my family never had any true friends, and they're so used to having toxic friends that, how do I say this? That they don't see any problem with me having toxic friends myself. Or they know that their friends are toxic, so they want me to be as miserable as they are. Or they probably just want to manipulate me into into being damaged from being treated badly by these toxic friends. Or those friends that I had are their informants, and they're using those friends that I had to keep me from reaching my goals. Either way, the reason, I am not going to want friends for a while, for like a couple years, until I get to where I need to go. I need to be my own best friend for once.